everyone, welcome to a new episode of In Other Words with Danielle and Zara.
So this is a podcast where we talk about a wide variety of different subjects, from podcast recommends to embracing change. So in other words, we talk about all the things.
So today we are going to be talking about South African politics.
So
and
fun.
the local elections that are coming up on the 1st of November, which is so exciting. So because of that, we have a very special guest today, Luke Albert. Luke, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you guys for having me. Nice to finally be here. Character development has come a long way. As you said, got the polar neck. I'm on a podcast. I'm really going.
Look at you.
Going places. I've sort of old schoolmates with Zara and Danielle. I've studied politics and economics at UCT, and now I am a media researcher at the provincial parliament for the DA. So just a disclaimer, I will be objective as possible, but just I am affiliated, but I will not push any party stuff down people's throats.
Great.
Yes.
That is very good to know.
Yes. I would just like to read 2 tweets, just so you get a feel for who Luke is. This is from his personal Twitter account. In a space of a year, I've gone from showering and going to bed past midnight to getting into my PJs before 7. Character development, indeed. And I've just bought a bunch of polar neck jerseys I got from Woolies, a rewards card, and downloaded a bunch of 80s music. I'm turning into a middle-aged suburban housewife.
Great. You're almost reaching your highest self.
I'm really
You're
just
so close.
achieving top of Maslow's hierarchy right now.
Look at
Very, very good. All right,
Cool.
so we asked you guys to send in some questions and let us know what you want us to chat about in this episode. So the one question kind of covered a lot of stuff that we wanted to chat about. So firstly, we want to have this as quite a casual conversation.
Yes.
And obviously, because it's a podcast, we're not going to be doing a 2-hour lecture or whatever.
No. And it will be understandable for us people who are not super politically involved and didn't do some sort of political science in varsity.
AKA Zara.
Yes. I am the dumb one here, so
You're not
don't
dumb.
worry guys, we'll keep up.
Yes. And yeah, as always, do your own research. Find out if anything we've missed about any parties or anything like that,
Yes.
because we really can't cover everything.
No.
So yeah, okay. So the first one, which I feel is quite important, what does the government structure in South Africa look like, and how does it compare with other countries?
So South Africa is a constitutional democracy, and we have a 3-tier system. So we have a national government, we have provincial governments for all 9 provinces, and then we have local municipalities, which are made up of metropolitans, so essentially big cities, and we have 8 of them in South Africa. Then we have district municipalities, and of those district municipalities, we have local municipalities that make up those districts.
Okay.
So it's a very sort of tiered system. Emphasis is placed on national government. So national government has mandate over many issues, but it is shared through all 3 tiers of government. So constitutionally, in section 3, there's a one line that kind of describes it. So all tiers of government are distinctive, interrelated, and interdependent. So they have their own authorities and sort of autonomy. But the idea is that cooperative governance goes through all sort of ways in which government fulfills its mandate. So the idea is that you want the governments or the different levels of government to work together. Some do more than others, but realistically, you still try to achieve the same outcome.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine it as a sort of upside down triangle, national has the most power and scope, then provincial has a smaller scope but still has significant powers, and then local municipalities have a more prescribed and sort of smaller group of things to look after.
Yes.
So if you compare it to, let's say, America, for example, and their states, there
A
are
two-party
very clear different laws
system,
between different states. It's quite, South Africa's not like that.
So if you can imagine it between a unitary government system, so where it's just a national government and municipalities, and then a federal state, like the United States, where it's a similar system. So we basically have I want to say quasi, so like a fake federal system, where we still have those different tiers of government. We call them different things in comparison to America. But America, for example, has much more autonomy. So their cities, the cities, their their states have far more autonomy in comparison to the federal government. And here, as I said, the national government has
the power.
Yes, there's much more power, and we are basically it's almost subordinate sort of power. So we can't. We can actually provinces and councils or municipalities can draft their own laws. So municipalities have bylaws, and provinces actually can have their own constitutions and have their own bills that they pass. But it's all in the spirit of the constitution. So it can't be in conflict with any sort of legislation that's national or the constitution, because that's sort of overarching legislation.
I'm interested, to just, how do you think, which one do you advocate for? Because I'm just thinking, I don't know, I look at something where you have so much power in different states, and don't you think that's like very divisive?
Yeah, it can be sometimes, but I think in terms of just the intention, so in terms of democracy, from our point of view, I am definitely an advocate of a federal state, because it allows you to have government closer to the people.
Yeah,
you can they can subscribe to issues that are more localized. Sure, if, for example, in South Africa, there are arguments of, kind of reinforces the different spatial sort of makeups of our country, and like how it's all that sort of spatial planning of the apartheid legacies. But realistically speaking, it allows for government to be closer to the people. You can also allow, if you want to vote differently, you can see their policies in action. Which I think it adds to democracy. It might be more expensive in terms of like a central government that has all the power, and there's no sort of leveled or tiered system. And
we've seen why that's a terrible thing.
We can, I'm sure we'll see a bit later in the podcast, but also just in real life we see that. But it might, because with the federal system you've got more governments and you're paying more people, but in effect I think it does more good than a sort of unitary system.
Okay, one more question. I'm so sorry. 2 parties versus as many political parties as you want?
Definitely the latter. You would see, like in Britain and the US, they tend to have the sort of dominance of 2 parties. But it's got to do with their sort of electoral systems, which we can discuss a bit later. But I'm definitely an advocate for multiple parties. It's just good for democracy. It keeps things lively. Competition is good both in business and in politics, because if we don't have competition, you become lazy.
Exactly.
So coalition politics is the future of South Africa. We see it in Germany. Recently they had the elections, and they're going to have 3 parties at least forming a coalition to run the federal government. And we'll go down that route as well. I think it will be difficult just because of the current makeup of our opposition politics. With very divisive, not necessarily divisive, I mean, it can, depending on the party, but in terms of divided views that you can't really share.
It will be quite tricky.
It will be quite tricky. So you can't find common ground that easily, but, we will have to make do, and, we have to, and there's no other choice.
Exactly.
Cool.
Next question. What is the difference between local and national elections?
The one is local and the other one is national.
Thank you, Zara.
Thank you, Zara.
You're welcome.
She's so helpful.
very insightful deduction there. So, I mean, Zara's quite right. So,
she's not wrong.
Pat on the back there. So with national elections, they go under the term of general elections. So you'll vote for a national government and then the provincial government. So you've got 2 ballots. They run on a proportional representation system. So they take the amount of votes out of the total votes, and that percentage is what the people or the parties get in National Assembly, which is basically our national parliament. And then in the province, it's the same system. The percentage you get, it's translated into votes.
So it's essentially how many seats.
Yes. So percentage.
I think they're like 400
There are
seats.
400 seats in national parliament, and then different. I'm not sure if there are different sizes of parliaments. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament, for example, they're 42.
Okay.
I think they're 42. I should now work there.
It's okay.
But yes, it's the same sort of idea. And
Yes.
then with local elections, we have 2 ballots as well, but it's for different sort of lists and ideas. So we have the proportional representation system. That's a PR system. So depending on what votes the party gets, it's translated into how many seats they get in every council. But then we also have something called sort of first past the post system. So it's when you vote for your ward councillor, you vote for the person directly, so that you're
Yes.
directly accountable for the communities they represent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of how the proportional representation system works, you could literally have one person get 10,000 votes and then one person get 9,999, but the one with 10,000 votes gets that sort of seat. So
Yeah.
Yes,
that's
it's
why
not-
we have that balanced approach. So there's a more equitable share of parties represented in councils and provinces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if we were to have just the first past the post system like we see in the UK or the US, you don't get a great representation of all parties. That's the logic
Yeah.
behind it. And it not, I mean, I believe in the sort of the balanced approach.
Yes.
Because you can theoretically have an example where in the UK, for example, you could have someone who gets 42% of the proportional votes. Another party gets like a 40 or 39, but then you've got the one party with the slightly more votes getting hundreds of seats more than in
Yeah.
Parliament.
Yes.
So it is a sort of what's the word I'm thinking of, a skewed distribution of votes. Bringing up some statistics from high school.
Oh, please
Yeah,
no.
let's not get PTSD. But essentially, yes. So it's two ballots for each election, but just different things you're voting for, essentially.
Okay.
Cool. And then this person also asked, and I think a lot of people will be in the same boat. It's their first election, and what kind of things should they expect? So now, I only voted for the first time in the past national elections. So just like from my insights, expect to queue. Obviously, like
Get a
make
good
sure that
tan.
make sure that you're registered properly and all that. So
You're
what
wearing
do you have
sunblock?
to add on to that? You've already mentioned the ballots,
So there's
obviously.
two.
Yes, there are two ballots. So registration has closed. So
Unfortunately.
Yes.
so if
Which
you haven't,
is-
shame on you.
No, but which is sad. I was speaking to two people yesterday, two of the teenagers in the church where I work, and both of them turn 18 now this month.
Oh, shame.
So they're not, so it's now on the 15th and then another one later in the month, and they were so upset that
But
they couldn't
you
register.
could've- they
you
could've
registered at
registered.
They
16,
did.
16 and above. You
No,
can
no.
still registering.
Yeah.
Oh, but they can't vote.
Yes, yes.
That's bleak.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is
So
annoying.
I was like,
Well, no, I
that's-
mean, if they are 18 now and they registered beforehand, then they could have voted
but
now.
they said that they went online and it denied them.
That's weird.
Someone get to the bottom of this, please.
Yes, get to the bottom of it.
Yes, so registration aside, like you said, long lines. Just bring your ID or something to just identify yourself. And then I'm not sure how it'll be now with COVID, so it'll probably be distancing and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, you'll get a little stain on your thumb for a few weeks, and hopefully you'll get some sort of joy of contributing towards our democracy. I think it's I mean, you have the right to not vote, but I think it's to be an active citizen. Just because if you don't
absolutely.
vote, your vote will be determined by someone else.
Yes.
And sure, you can complain about the
That's the
politics of the
thing.
day.
You can't complain if you haven't voted.
Exactly, because you've done nothing about it. Like
Yeah.
you can go into social media.
You
and,
can't. No, you
Yeah.
can't.
I will dislike it.
The influences, the sort of
Yes.
sort of activism on there. But and I can understand, like you might not find someone you can align to or represent you necessarily, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
in real terms, someone else is going to determine your vote. So
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know. Realistically, I don't know if anyone really finds a candidate that and a party that they agree with everything on.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So, this is actually what I wanted to talk about next. It's just how do you find a party, or in this case as well, a ward councillor that you like? Like, what would your suggestion be to people?
Well, I think from the onset, I would say, since this is local elections, it's basically service delivery.
Yes.
Yeah.
All parties and candidates have, their respective ideologies and policies that might be more applicable to national elections.
Yeah.
But these you should look down to service delivery and track record.
Yes.
So in South Africa, it is difficult to see because we have two dominant parties. So we
Yeah.
have a number, but in terms of governance, it's primarily the ANC and the DA. There are a number of coalitions throughout the country, but it's sort of very small.
Unless you live
Yeah.
there and
in
you
sort of
wouldn't
Gatsrand,
know.
middle of nowhere. I don't want to discriminate anyone if there are sort of listeners on the other side of the world. But essentially, yes, we only really see in the major sort of cities and smaller municipalities in
Yes.
action. And I would suggest, I suppose the beauty of the local elections, you can have that thing. You can choose for a ward candidate that you think will most represent you in the council. And then you can choose on the party list what party you think represents you most.
Okay.
Obviously, do your own research. But I would say, with your perspective going forward, if you're doing your research, just look at service delivery
Yeah, absolutely.
going forward.
I also think, though, because I've been seeing all these posters around of the different ward councillors.
Yeah.
And I mean, must I go and look into their background and on their Twitter to kind of figure out? Because I don't know, half the names I've never heard.
Same.
I mean, same. I
Who
mean,
are these
I don't know
people?
half
He
the
works
people.
there.
I work there, like, who the hell are you? But yeah, I mean, you can. I think most people anyway just go with the same party, then the same party.
That's the
That's under the
accord.
candidate here.
Yes.
I mean, these elections going forward, I think there will probably be a bigger influence or increase in independent candidates.
Yeah.
There was a
Interesting.
constitutional court ruling that they have to make provision for independent candidates, especially for the national assemblies and
Wow.
the provincial parliaments. But that legislation is still in motion.
Okay.
But it'll have to be ready by 2024, which is the general election.
Very interesting.
But theoretically now, as a ward candidate, you can go independent. Yeah.
Wow.
Very interesting. Cool. Shall we get into some of the parties now?
Yes.
So we briefly, as briefly as possible, going to discuss the ANC, the DA, EFF, and then
We
Yeah,
got
we got
requests of
requests.
other parties.
so we will discuss those as well. So yeah, let's firstly go into the ANC. Now, I was looking at their website and their manifesto and all that, and I find it incredibly difficult to see like exactly what they stand for. Like a lot of parties,
Yeah.
like the EFF, you can clearly see they have a Marxist ideology. I mean, if you know what that is, obviously.
Yes.
But yeah, I find the ANC is like much harder to pinpoint. So what is your...
That is intentional.
I suppose it is, definitely. I mean, the ANC is a very broad church. I mean, you have those who are more moderate and sort of like, Tita Mboweni, who was the former finance minister, he was definitely part of the older structures where it was more sort of moderate politics.
Yeah.
And then you got, on the far side, you've got very sort of radical politics. It's a very broad church, but somehow they all pull it together. It's, get the votes before you over sort of party divisions. But I think, the manifestos, it's very wish-washy. I think it's very sort of broad. You can't really see see what they want to show, but it's like a bit of
Not
everything.
definite.
I mean, I went through the manifesto this morning as well, and it's same old. It's
Same old,
promising a lot, which I suppose all political parties are promising a lot. I mean,
This is-
there's
I
elections.
did
What they
see.
do.
What did I screenshot to you yesterday? This is hilarious. I'm gonna find it while you
Okay.
carry on speaking.
Cool.
So I mean, you can see the ANC is going more towards. I mean, if you want to use sort of labels, not towards the left in terms of more sort of state-funded sort of welfare and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You could see them as that being a progressive thing to do. Having a very developmental state, which is what they sort of prescribe to. You can also see it as electioneering because promising more things to do, but then not having money to do it.
Yeah.
But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I think when you look at the ANC, you kind of have to see them as like they still like very much subscribe to this idea that they're a liberation party.
Yes.
So that's very much what they focus on. Like if you go onto their website, which is quite outdated, unfortunately, you'll see like a lot of the things that they talk about, like they want to be non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, which obviously we are, and like fighting for social justice, getting rid of apartheid, all that kind of stuff. That's
Yeah.
still like very much the main tenets of what they believe in. But do you want to just quickly go through some of the main points of their manifesto?
Yeah, so they've kind of touched on everything I did.
They do.
I copied a bit across. I just copied their sort of main
Plagiarism.
headings. Yeah, plagiarism. I mean, I've left university. What can I say?
You can do it now.
Turn it in can take a step back now.
I agree.
So, I mean, they touch on the usual things like electricity, housing, and land, and fighting corruption, which they always say,
Yes.
bringing about change, and they are not really the change, that sort of thing, making municipalities more financially viable. So one thing I can add, So especially with local elections coming now, the ANC has something called the district development model. So essentially, I mean, we can definitely see now municipalities are in a dire. It's just a big mess essentially.
Yes.
For real.
They are, their finances are in taxes, governance is weak, and you can see everyday people, poor people especially, they're not getting the services that they need and deserve. So to remedy this, the ANC has provided this plan, which basically is kind of having more sort of coordinated plans, which is true. Like, you don't want to have in public policy, you have something called silo effects. So if you can imagine like those grain silos, like, people doing the things individually and not really coordinated. In the long term, it doesn't really add to something. So definitely there are efforts to kind of make sure that it is done more coordinated and sort of cooperatively.
Okay.
But with the ANC, what they're trying to do is they have something called one budget, one policy, one district sort of things, where they basically, in real terms, it's kind of circumventing provincial and, having more sort of district approaches and sort of not really sort of abiding by the autonomy that the provinces and local municipalities have. So it's basically, I mean, my opinion, I'm saying, as I said, disclaimer.
This is your opinion.
This is my opinion. The ANC would provide policies which weren't too bad. I mean, they're in good tension sometimes. But when they would fail, they would prescribe more sort of state mandates, so like more control, and then they will fail anyways because they're hideous at implementing it. And then they'll prescribe more control. So I think you can definitely see as the elections go by, there's more and more emphasis being placed on more state control on certain things.
Yes.
Which, I mean, you can see it's sort of a death spiral, in my opinion.
I mean, you look at the situation and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think in Cape Town, we are kind of, and also like in our neighborhoods, we are in our bubble. We don't really know.
We really...
For real.
We really are.
Like we are. I'm not saying like it's an idea, like we really are. But, if you just drive out to other municipalities, it's especially the smaller ones, where financing especially... that's the major reason why municipalities suffer. So in general terms, the national government divides funding up. It's called the division of revenue, and they have something called the equitable share formula, which has a bunch of variables that determine what amount of money provinces and municipalities get.
Okay.
And they also have conditional grants. So you will give you money and say you have to do this, this, and this with it. But those with obviously funding and cash flow becoming more and more scarce because our nation's becoming more and more indebted.
Fun times.
It's absolutely fun. The municipalities are worse off in that sense because they've got less and less money, and it's not coming as often. And then also the money that they get from rates and taxes in the sort of cities, like for water and property tariffs, sort of like that. People are not paying because people are struggling. So that's just a compounded effect. So that's basically the sort of I don't know what point I was making.
It's okay. It was interesting.
We'll get through to some ending, I guess.
Yes. Cool. Shall we go to the next one?
Yeah, the one thing I would say about the ANC, I can't put myself in the position of someone else, but let's just say that I am a black person living in and really struggling in this country. My thing is still, like, I think we often say, how can you vote for the ANC when evidently everything is a mess, but it's like they are the party that pushed us out of apartheid, and
they have that reputation.
Yes, this is their reputation, and it's like, how can I trust someone else to not have things go back to the way they were? So like, what is your message to that kind of person? How do you get through to them? Because inevitably they've seen the history of our country, and this is the party that's promising these things, and I mean,
not
everyone
delivering, unfortunately.
Yes, but it's like, I don't know, I feel like for them it must be a huge risk to not vote for the ANC in a sense, just because
I know what you mean.
Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you...
That's the golden question, like just opening up new voter bases for any party, like kind of break new grounds, I said, in a sense. But I think to say firstly, politics and voting, or voting for political parties in South Africa is not a sort of I don't think it's done sort of rationally. It's not, looking down at policies. People don't read policies.
People don't even have access to policies.
Exactly.
You just know what you're told.
Even if you do, people don't. I mean, it's more about sort of the emotional connotations that go with it.
Exactly.
And there are different reasons for that. It could be, my parents voted, so I'll vote for that person. Or a certain event happened, or the people just, maybe the place in which you live actually delivers, and you can see that. But it's not done to like sort of by the playbook. Like we would hope that people would read things. Not that it really necessarily matters all the time, because some policies never get implemented. It's sort of airy-fairy language.
Exactly.
But I think to answer that, I don't know. That's the golden question. You can't. It's a very emotional issue, which it is around the world, but in South Africa, especially, like you said, just due to our past. And I think it's more the older generation which votes to that sense.
That's what I was just about to say.
And so, the youth of years, they don't really partake in elections, which is the next big problem we have to face. Like, how do we get the youth to be involved?
Vote.
But also, that's another golden question. So honestly, it's massive problems for political parties going forward, trying to kind of tap into those sort of constituencies.
Speaking about the youth, a party that is appealing to a lot of the youth at the moment, I think, is the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. And we know, obviously, that run by Julius Malema. And like I said before, like, they have a clear Marxist ideology underpinning their whole party. So do you just want to chat a bit about them, like what they stand for, your thoughts?
The DA is also a broad church, but I'm definitely, I'd like to think I'm a centered person. Like, I agree with some things and I agree with other things. The EFF is definitely, like I say, it's the Marxist organization. It's very much on the far end of the left spectrum.
They literally describe themselves as a radical and militant economic emancipation group.
Which should be worrying for democracy if you're going to say militancy in your manifesto. But yes, any party, in my opinion, who subscribes to sort of far-reaching ideologies, I think is just a bunch of lunatics, in my opinion.
It's just very difficult because you are wanting to govern people.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, people in a country, it's a wide range of different people.
Exactly.
I don't think in any country all the people are the same.
Legit. And, we've lived through the 20th century and we've seen how sort of, socialist countries have completely failed. I know there's a lot of talk of it, like, there's many faults in capitalism. I'm not going to sort of, but at the end of the day, it's still the system which produces the most efficiently, and it all depends about the political system backing that system. And you can have a party that, or a government that uses those resources wisely and actually helps people. So that's why we have we have welfare states now. And that's how capitalism has evolved. It's not the 1800s. But, I feel like the EFF and parties alike, they have very sort of idealistic approaches to things that I find completely impractical.
That's the thing. It's
exactly
all nice on paper.
Exactly. If you want equality, we'll have equality of poverty. I think that's the effect of the. If the policies were true, we only have to look across our borders to see how, expropriation or compensation on a sort of governed scale looks like, and how sort of authoritarian sort of political parties have taken over certain states, and how it's messed up countries. Because if you want a successful country, you want strong, independent political and economic institutions. And I don't think the EFF does it, although it does. The youth involvement is strong, especially with students on campus, which you can see. You can see most SRCs are run by the EFF Student Command, but then again, there are many people in those things that us knew who want to go into banking, and I think that's just also like the peak hypocrisy.
That's very
like,
interesting.
you want to go into commerce, but then your organization is
like,
what again?
Not that.
Interesting.
But basically, my sort of broad opinion is I don't think the EFF is good news at all. It's just they won't. Even if they were to get in power, they can't implement those things successfully.
And I think you just need to look not to this continent, but the history of the world,
literally,
and how it's been very poorly implemented and it's failed every time.
Yeah.
Because
It is what it is.
people are fallible, and people in politics, politicians
Yeah.
are greedy in a broad sense. I
And
mean, there are
yeah.
good people,
Yeah.
but you can't rely on a small bunch of people to run things
Rule
properly.
That's the
Exactly.
thing. Because like a lot of what they're calling for, like for example, like the nationalization of mines and banks and all that kind of stuff, like
Yeah.
all good and well if you have excellent leaders in charge
Yeah.
who are not corrupt, and like that's just a lot to ask of people, like no matter what political party you're part of.
Exactly.
But I just want to, I saw there were like 7 points that they had on their manifesto. So I just want to run through those quickly just so y'all can get a good idea. So the first one, obviously like classic EFF, is land expropriation without compensation for equal redistribution. We all know what that's about.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the second one is, you know, the nationalization of mines, banks, and other institutions like that without compensation. The second one, they have build state and government capacity, so essentially just strengthening all that. Then they want to introduce free quality education, healthcare, houses, and all that kind of stuff, which obviously sounds so lovely.
It does.
And then they want to have like grow the industrial sector. So that's to create more sustainable jobs, and we see that in a lot of socialist countries that they start off with the industrial sector. And then also they want to focus on the African economy as a whole, and also lastly have an open, accountable, corrupt-free government. So-
Wonderful words, like the thesaurus was
Yeah.
used. Yeah.
That's the
Yes.
thing. Like I remember when I was learning about Marxism in high school and doing the first reading, I was like, this sounds wonderful and like utopian,
It is utopian,
but it's
though.
impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people are, I mean, I subscribe to sort of a liberal outlook where people are sort of self-determining. I mean, everyone has what they would like to do in life. And sort of those Marxist things sees it as a more communal thing. Obviously, in South Africa, you can't sort of go one approach over the other.
Yeah.
Because we are a rainbow nation, or we try to be at least. But we are,
Yes.
in terms of, we are very diverse in sort of in
Yes.
terms of culture, ideologies, beliefs, and religions, and all sort of things.
Yeah.
And I don't think necessarily with the EFF's outlook, and also just in a Marxist outlook, it's going to be good for the country, just because
No.
you can't. I don't know. It's just, it doesn't suit.
And
me.
the thing is, even like if you look at some of the states, some countries like Denmark and all that, and you know those countries are really doing quite well under. I think they have a social welfare, democratic state. Social
Yeah,
democratic?
it's all. I mean, it's
Kind
Denmark
of.
is the
It's-
place to be. I've
it's like
heard.
like elements of you know socialism in terms of having free education and all that kind of stuff, but then they still have a capitalist economy mostly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, those things sound really wonderful, but to have anything like that, you need to have most of the
Money
people paying
as
tax.
well.
yeah.
And the thing is, here it is. I mean, what percentage of people
it's
pay
less
tax?
than 8% of our population
Yeah.
pays tax. Yeah.
So it's
And it's because a lot of people just can't.
They can't,
You know,
yeah.
it's not
And
because
it's-
people don't want to.
no, exactly.
Exactly.
It's also, they also have just tax evasion on a large scale. But yeah, that's that. Obviously, you do your own research with the EFF. Like I said, I mean, I personally, on the political scale, I'm more left, but like I am very open to most things.
Yeah.
But I find when a party almost promotes more division and hatred, even like if it's not even in their manifesto, like you can just see it in like speeches.
Yes.
I would just be wary of that. But
Yeah.
obviously, it is up to you. So
One
do
thing
that.
I will say about the EFF, and I don't think this is a good thing, but it could be a good thing, and this is why they're very much appealing to the youth, is just the passion at which
yeah.
like the leaders deliver their speeches and they appeal to people. And I think a lot of people could use a lot more passion. And I think if I were someone who, whether I'm in a place of desperation or I'm just looking for some sort of like resolution to something, if I have someone in my face who's passionate and seems to really mean what they say, that's very attractive.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it would be nice if people were a little bit more politically passionate. But again, I'm in my Durbanville bubble,
Exactly.
so I
Yeah.
don't see that.
But I think
When you're passionate about good things.
exactly charisma is
That's
very
nice.
is very important.
Very important.
With as sort of your political skills as a politician, you have to inspire people, you have to convince people. But in the same breath, you know many people who are, you get those very passionate people, but it just kind of masks sort of. Yeah, but like they've got nothing to show for it. Like it's like a big sort of paint
Yes.
work, and there's nothing behind you.
Yeah.
You get them in all parties, no doubt. I'm not saving sort of face for anyone right now.
Yeah.
And for me personally, like I get that, you know, it is nice to have a speech that you can really like, wow, this really resonates with me.
Yeah.
But I'm of the opinion that, I mean, in South Africa we do, you know, we are a very lively nation. There's a lot, you know, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of, you know, culture behind it. In Europe, not as much.
That's the truth.
I mean, you don't have that same liveliness. It's you know,
Yes.
it's just, you know, it's, I don't know, it's very sort of boring. But I mean, I kind of subscribe to that. Like, for me, a politician, like I'm not really into that. For me personally, I suppose, which is why I don't really like doing speeches and stuff like that. I like being behind the scenes and stuff.
Yeah.
I just do the work. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
like,
that's the thing.
That's the thing. It's
you
all about
actually need
doing
to
the
do the
work.
work.
so you could, like, for example, you know, Angela Merkel, I mean, she's been, you know, she's this quiet lady. She's just got, you know, a doctorate, you know, doing her things. And, you know, she was in power for Germany for 16 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and she was the sort of antithesis of sort of those big mouth people. And, you know, she's, you know, whilst you've had those people, you know, kind of point out at her, like, you know, boring, you know, blah, blah, blah. They've left and she's seen them through. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Very
think
true.
about how much of your political job is the speech and stuff.
it's
And
a little
your
bit. It's,
campaigning.
It's
It's like,
teeny.
yeah.
I mean, it's every 5 years, but in, like, most of the time it's just admin the whole time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
All right. The DA, Democratic
DA.
Alliance. Luke, I'm going to let you have this one.
So, I mean, again, the DA is also broad church.
Yes.
I mean, it's definitely a centre party. So you've got people more on the right and you've got people more on the left, and you've even got some people who go towards the extremes.
Yeah.
But then again, it is a broad church. And, you know, I think part of a liberal sort of ideology is that you are welcoming of everything in that respect.
Yeah.
I don't believe in having sort of like, you know, sort of dogmatic views and parties. And, you know, if you don't follow this, you know, you better watch out.
Yes.
And there are elements of like that in all parties, but you know,
Yes.
it's politics at the end of the day. But in my opinion, you know, the DA does have its problems. There's no doubt about that, and as it does any political party. But in a sense, for me, I think it offers sort of realistic approaches to certain issues and solutions for that, and it also has track record and governance
That's true.
Yeah.
to back it up. Because you can have parties with maybe a very sort of logical, you know, evidence approach to the policies, but that they
The
don't get elected.
implementation of it is.
Exactly. If you can't see the actual evidence of that, then
Yeah.
for me that's probably the most important. Because, like you said, you don't have to completely agree with a party,
Yeah.
but you know, it's how they operate in government which makes a
Yeah.
difference, and you know that will inform your decision hopefully.
Yeah.
And I think like that's why in a space where in our context living in Durbanville and being in this Western Cape you know environment where the DA has been in power is even I look at just the last couple of years of watching DA leaders come and go and just how everything's played out. There's a lot of things that are, for lack of a worse word, very cringe and questionable.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Of course.
But I look at the service delivery in this province versus other provinces, and it's like, it's very hard. Like, I wouldn't say I'm an advocate for the DA, but it's very hard not to base your vote on what you're
you've
seeing, you know? Like,
Yeah, that's the thing. And like, I find a lot of people are incredibly harsh on the DA, and like, I really do understand. Like, I've seen, you know, many tweets and even in person, people are saying, like, the DA is not really that good because look how much inequality there still is in the Western Cape. And I'm like, okay, fair, but it's everywhere in the whole country. And
Yeah.
like, realistically, there's only so much you can do, like, when you are still constrained by the national government and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. So keep that in mind,
Yeah.
obviously.
I definitely want to emphasize that. I think many people, and you know, you are definitely entitled to opinion, but they
Yeah,
go without
absolutely.
the understanding of how mandates of government works.
Yeah.
And they kind of group everything together as if it were from America, where it's very federated and
Yeah.
they've got lots of responsibilities to do. And I mean, even our municipalities, you know, especially the metropolitans, they're quite big. I mean, in the Western Cape, for example, their budget for the city of Cape Town is like 53 billion, and the province is 75 or so. So I mean, it's a large part of our people in the Western Cape. I shouldn't say our people. That sounds very nationalistic.
Yeah, very.
The residents in the Western Cape live in Cape Town, and that makes up the bulk of our economy and sort of
That's true.
population. So, and they tend to. I mean, you can, and as I was saying, so like the councils and the municipalities have broad approaches, you know, but obviously it's still constrained more than that of province, and
Yeah.
provinces are more constrained than that of national government.
exactly. I think what a lot of people don't understand is you expect so much from a party when that party's not in power nationally,
It's difficult.
yes, there's only so much authority you have. There's only so much budget that is allocated to you. You don't just decide this money is coming to me. The national governments are making that decision.
Literally, I think that also goes back to like how it's important that we go to a federal system where we can see more parties in action.
Yeah.
And because I am a DA supporter. I'm not going to hide that fact, but I would like
I
to
thought
see.
you just worked for them, but you didn't.
Just
money,
for fun.
just for things, for the dough, for the
See
dough.
you at the EFF next.
We'll see. Who knows?
We'll interview you then.
Exactly. I'll go hopscotch into that corner. But that's why I think a federal system is needed, because you can see more parties in action. I would actually hope that we'll see a more diverse representation of parties, so people can actually see if they should vote for this party or if they shouldn't. Because it does make things difficult. Yeah.
There is a part of me, and we've had this, Danielle and I have had this discussion. It's like, I don't know, we're almost in this rut of like, maybe we need a completely different party to rise up and, do the work. And, it's like our current parties, there's so much history and so much mistrust or distrust?
Yes,
Mistrust? I don't know.
I don't know.
That it's like, maybe we need like a new blood, if you will. That's very difficult, but I mean, it's also a good thing, like you say.
Just another question. A person wrote in and they said that they'd feel more comfortable if there was someone of color leading the DA. So like, obviously we had there was a person of color leading before. So what do you have to say about that kind of thing?
Well, I think from the onset, South Africa, race definitely matters. I mean, if you think otherwise, you're delusional.
Exactly.
But I think it's how we approach it which matters. And I think especially you can distinguish between someone's skin color and sort of the ideologies that they subscribe to. So for example, let's take someone if it's white. There's a difference between whiteness and just being white, because obviously there are sort of social norms between, we can talk about the racism behind whiteness and stuff like that, but I think you should just look towards what people subscribe to. And I can understand, as people, we are social beings. We like being seeing our groups
ourselves represented.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We like,
so I want a woman. Come on.
Exactly. Like people take comfort in that. Like we feel safe in our different communities, whether it's religion, seeing us being represented in terms of race, and it's definitely a byproduct, and it's kind of emphasized of our history, definitely.
Absolutely.
But to that person, I would say you should just look at their intention, and what they're trying to kind of advocate for.
And maybe just look, as difficult as it is, look beyond the leader.
Yes, I mean,
it is understandable to get
but
caught
I
up
mean,
in it, though.
Skin
even
is,
me, like I've had many reservations.
No,
currently,
I can understand. I mean, but skin is skin deep, and there's more to a person, because you can have, and I think it's also dangerous in a broader sense if you subscribe sort of different ideas to different identities. So you can have someone, you might be a woman, you might be of a certain race, but is advocating for very, very dire policies.
I've met very many women who are anti feminists.
Exactly. I mean, you can look. There's a minister in Britain. I can't remember what her name is, but she's very much conservative. And I mean, I'm not saying Kamala Harris is conservative at all, but I mean, sure, I will give her that. She's the first person of color and woman to be, the deputy president. But then again, she's locked up many people for doing drugs.
Exactly.
So, and I mean, American politics should just be left by itself. That's a whole other basic game. But
a whole other thing.
The point I'm getting to is like, you should just look at the intentions, and I can understand how it's race is very emotional, and I'm not going to take away from it at all, and it can sometimes feel uncomfortable looking at someone in that way, especially with our history. And I mean, some people are just cringy. I'm not going to say that, but you should look at the intentions and what they want to do.
Absolutely. Cool. So then we can move on to some of the other things that people have asked us to talk about.
I think we can just do like a rapid fire.
Yeah, and the first is the Cape Independence Party. So quickly, thoughts?
Well, the idea of that Cape secession and independence, I think, is just reactionary politics.
Exactly.
Sure, things aren't perfect. I think from their mindset, nothing has changed. I mean, like even with the DM power and the Western Cape definitely being objectively better in terms of service delivery than the rest of the country. There are things that haven't changed, unfortunately, because it's a national mandate, and we are a country, and we can't move past that with our current governing systems.
Yeah.
And we are sort of stuck with, we can do things better, but we're still stuck in with that system.
Yeah.
And I think it's just reactionary politics.
Yeah.
And firstly, thankfully, there's no constitutional provision for independence.
Yeah.
Although they try use, there's a section called or clause 235, where it's self-determination by cultural or language place. It's like one line. It's like
That's
it's
interesting.
Yes.
but
Do
it's
they
a
know
very
that
vague thing. Like, what
we
does
have
that mean?
Yeah.
Actually?
more than one kind of person?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
their sort of argument for that is completely false, because
Yeah.
the Western Cape's very diverse anyway. So like,
Yeah.
what identity are you going after?
Yeah.
Exactly.
But even if there were a referendum, it won't be done just because it's not constitutionally it's not provisioned for, and the ANC or any other party in power won't allow it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just for my. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, sorry. I was
Yeah.
gonna just add on to that. Like, I've seen people say like, oh, it'll be democratic though because the people would have voted to get the Western Cape away. But like, democracy in South Africa is like democracy in the whole of South Africa.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just get a few people who are like, oh, we've all decided that we want to move away now, so we're gonna go do that. Like, it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah.
No, definitely, and I think that goes back to like how more important it is to we should go towards a more federal system where provinces are given more powers, especially when it comes to policing, electricity. Thankfully, there are steps being done for it, so municipalities will hopefully soon be able to buy their own power from independent power producers.
Sure.
So load shedding will hopefully end soon. But I think hopefully, I hope so, big hope so. But just provinces being able to do more things, especially mandates like I said, policing and other things like that, which they don't do currently, will, I think, sort of not really stop, but it'll definitely mitigate the sentiments of wanting Cape independence. It's
very interesting. Like, I'm personally not for like Cape independence at all. I think it's very much like a pipe dream. I just can't see how it will allow the Western Cape to thrive.
And it's
that's the
interesting because
thing.
yes, we are maybe doing better than other provinces, but now you're putting your trust in a completely separate party. You've never seen them in action. So now we break off from the rest of South Africa. What is that gonna look like? Gonna look like when everyone that's maybe been keeping everything, the lights on and everything together, now moves out because they don't subscribe to this breakaway. It's like everything that's working in this country, kind of removing that in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, that too, but also like for ourselves, I mean, realistically, okay, suppose with the municipalities, hopefully soon will be buying their own power, but like other services, running your own country it's a big thing.
Yeah, I'm like, it's I don't know, it seems very impractical, and for me, I don't know how that would happen without like complete civil unrest. How is there not going to be a civil war if
I wouldn't
happened?
I mean, hypothetically, I don't think it would lead to that necessarily, but I think this, like, building the systems that make a state. I mean, you have to have a state that can enforce the rules and be able to support itself. And even though there is a lot of economic activity in the Western Cape, it's predominantly tourism and agriculture, and there is industry, especially like on the northern suburbs side, but we have ports and stuff like that. But apart from that, like, how else are we going to support ourselves? So I like you said, it's a pipe dream in my opinion. I think it will be far better if we advocate for more sort of federal stuff.
Cool.
I also, sorry, I've just been thinking about this a lot lately. And maybe this is very delusional of me, and I'm overly optimistic, but I don't know, that feels divisive in a country that for years has fought for inclusivity and diversity
and unity.
You know what I mean?
I just feel like it's doing the opposite of what our country could be.
Yeah, and I think it was Alan Wendy who said, you know, like, it's using the wrong tool. Like, you should be using your vote to make those kinds of changes that you want to see,
Exactly.
instead of trying to move away. But we can move on to the next party if
Yes,
y'all are
please.
fine.
Sure.
So briefly, I just wanted to speak a little bit about ActionSA. We got someone asked us to speak about that. So I think they were only
Very new.
formed last year, something like that, by Herman Mashaba. So do you want to speak a little bit about them?
Yes, so Herman Mashaba, he was actually the mayor of Johannesburg in the DA before he left. I mean, it seems like a lot of people are leaving, but I'm neither joking. I'm to the DA. I'm not. If you look at ActionSA and you look at their politics, it is very much through and through DA policy.
That's
it
what I
is
was going
very
to say.
much the same.
The DA in a different font.
The only different font, literally.
Different color too.
True,
It's a
sorry.
very ugly green.
Yeah, it's actually, isn't it quite similar to the EFF's green?
Does
EFF
EFF have a
green?
green?
Yes,
Isn't it
yellow.
red?
But a bit of green and like this, like the
And there's
symbol,
some
but it's
green
mostly
that's
red.
very
so.
similar.
Okay, semantics.
No, wait. The Freedom Front and ActionSA
Oh, yeah. Oh,
look
gosh,
similar
those
as
two.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well.
I know. I think I know what you mean by
Yes.
that.
But I think one crucial thing is Herman Mashaba and the party itself does subscribe to more, in my opinion, nationalistic tendencies.
Very much so.
There are xenophobic sort of vibes going through there.
Yes.
And Herman Mashaba himself has said things that I feel uncomfortable with, and like putting quotas. I think one example was in a tweet, like quotas in terms of how many local people work at restaurants because there are too many foreign people working there, or
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like
you
some
know,
xenophobic vibes going on in
exactly,
there.
and then also in like how the constitution needs to be more aligned. I know you guys are of the Christian faith, but like he says, God needs to be in the constitution.
Okay.
Listen,
And
we are.
I don't even agree
we are,
with that.
we are very much in disagreement
Okay,
of
good.
that.
So I you know, it's more sort of social conservative approaches in those sort of social issues.
Very
like,
much so.
You know, he says, you know, like, you know, social delivery in Johannesburg has fallen to pieces, and he's quite right. But
Yeah.
I think, like you said, it's sort of DA stuff in different fonts with a touch of xenophobia.
Yep. Yeah, when I initially like went through the website and read the things, I was like, oh, this actually looks pretty cool.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then there were also some things, like you said, like with the whole immigration thing, and like I really don't want this to come across in a bad way, but like I understand what they mean, but also like it can so quickly become something like really toxic, really racist, xenophobic, and I really don't agree with that at all. But go check them out, obviously.
Danielle's best advice always is, if you want to know about a political party or political leader, look at their Twitter account.
Yes. Go onto their Twitter.
Yes.
Anyway, since we were discussing God in the Constitution, the ACDP. So now you're an atheist.
Yes.
So I already know what your
Yeah.
opinions are on the ACDP. But do you want to just speak about that?
Yeah, so I think I do frown upon a political party if they are going to not be secular in their sort of judgment, because obviously their policies, if they do intend to be elected nationally, it would, you know, trickle down into the policies and legislation in this country.
Yeah.
And if we look at the ACDP part, I mean, I've got no problem with people believing what they like. It's
absolutely.
obviously a constitutional thing, but you know,
And I think that's important.
it's
that
important too. But
for
everyone
there to
has
be
their, you know,
some sort of peace in this.
exactly. But you know, the way in which they're coming across, especially, you know, in terms of just addressing social issues, I think that also touches on, you know, social issues that you guys have discussed in your previous episodes.
Yeah.
You know, like abortion, drugs, you know, sexual education. They take a very hardline conservative approach.
Very
Yeah.
much so.
And I mean, you can look at the data, and it might be uncomfortable to discuss those things as the way things are going. Even for me, it might be a bit uncomfortable. But the reality is, we need reform in those sort of ways in which we address it.
Yeah.
And the way which they're subscribing to is very much of 1950s sort of, you
I
know,
agree.
under the rock
Yeah.
sort of approach. In my
I
opinion.
think, if you listen to the podcast, you know, both Zara and I are Christians. And, you know, my thing is, like, I would never vote in a party that is, like, necessarily, like, that is Christian in the sense that they're going to impose, like, their own beliefs on other people.
Yeah.
Because realistically, like, I wouldn't want to live under another religion. I wouldn't want that. So, like,
Exactly.
why would I want people who are not Christian to do that? And at the same time, like, a lot of their things I just I don't agree with, you know, like being pro death penalty and like anti-comprehensive sex education, like especially if they're anti-abortion, like sorry, you need to up your game there. But
my thing is, because we have a lot of Christian listeners, is like ideally you see a Christian party and that's attractive to you, but for me, I look at the people during Jesus' time and the thing that the Lord kind of, it seems like, was very much criticized, because people wanted this political leader. They were expecting Jesus to come and be the savior to save them from Roman rule, and yet Jesus came to deal with people's hearts. I mean, he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. You know, he didn't come to be a political hero. And I think as Christians, like, if we're passionate about politics, let's be encouraging our kids to get good sex ed and go into politics, you know, and fix things that way. Just because it's not realistic to
just impose
policies. Like, that would turn me off Christianity, you know.
Same. Cool. And then we can just go into the Good Party and then the Freedom Front. We don't have too much to say about either of them, but briefly, the Good Party that is run by Patricia DeLille,
another person who
left the DA.
Left you guys.
But basically, from what I understand from them, is they are interested in, like, from their website I wrote, they want to ensure a more equitable South Africa based on the values and principles of social democracy. So do you have anything that you want to add on about them?
I mean, I think firstly it's a small party, and I feel like the party is definitely sort of judged by its leader, since it's so small. And Patricia DeLille has been through a number of parties. She was part of the PAC in the 90s.
Oh, true.
She had the Independent Democrats before going into coalition in 2006 with the DA in the city. And then her party dissolved into the DA in, I think, 2011 or so. And then she left and she's formed Good, which is, I think it's a reincarnation of the Independent Democrats.
Okay.
Do you think Good will just fall into the DA at some point again?
To be honest, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with these elections. I think they could garner more support with their proportional representation, that list over there, so the percentage the party gets in the council. But I don't think it will fare as much in ward councillors, just because that politics, it's so sort of fine in terms of, like, you can get someone as just marginally more, but they don't get that vote.
That's true.
And I think that's what they're going through. Their marketing and their campaigning is, they've been in sort of informal settlements and sort of poorer communities, looking at faults of the city. And that's like been their hardlining approach. But as a whole, the party, I mean, I don't really take notes. I think it will eventually kind of fall into itself again. Unless, then again, something weird and wonderful happens in these elections. There are so many unknowns in this election coming.
Very true.
I will say, again, it's nothing that we haven't seen any evidence of anything yet. So
Exactly.
It's hard to judge.
I mean, well, they do tend to go with, like, you know, when Patricia DeLille was mayor of the city, this happened, and now this is not happening. Maybe, but, you know, I don't know. I don't have much time for them either. I don't really. I mean,
I haven't
heard much about them, to be honest.
I mean, Brett Heron, who's the mayoral candidate, so it's, I suppose, another white man. But that joke's okay. Anyway, back on topic. But, you know, he I do have experience with him in the provincial parliament. I mean, he is a member of the provincial parliament, and he, out of all the political opposition members there, he is the most hardworking. I'll give him that, but he is very irritating, and he does and he does spin things quite a lot, in my opinion. So but that's my 2 cents.
Cool. I will say I did
like, he's listening here.
I liked the Good Parties, what was it, their pictures on their manifesto, their promotional photos of them boxing. I thought that was funny.
Make your hood good. Like, goodness.
I thought that was amusing. Okay, then lastly, just the Freedom Front. I find this party kind of concerning. Like,
they've been around for years.
Yeah, since 94. I think it was formed by Constant Viljoen. And basically they are very much for, fighting for, like, the protection and rights, I say in like quotations, of Afrikaners, very specifically. So that's why I would just be wary of it.
Targeting the coloured community.
Are they?
recently.
Okay.
I mean, yeah,
I've seen their posters everywhere in Durbanville, by the way.
I haven't
Take
been
a
really in
drive around
Durbanville.
I mean, they could get more votes now. Who knows? But I mean, their mayoral candidate is a guy called Leonard Max, he's a political prostitute. He's been with all political parties.
Okay. I love your word usage.
But they definitely, I think those smaller parties like Good and ActionSA and the Freedom Front Plus, they're all kind of going towards constituencies that they think they can get off the DA.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Sure.
And I think from broadly speaking, the Freedom Front Plus, which should be noticed, the Groenewalds, who's in both the party leader and the parliament, they come from the Conservative Party from before 94. So hint, hint, wink, wink. Something to keep in mind. People change, but just to keep in mind. And I don't think they... I mean, case in point, the ward I live in, which is just next to Durbanville, it's Ward 70. The DA, that's the best performing ward. It's like they get 90+% in terms of voter turnout for the DA.
So that's why you started working. You're this works for me.
But I mean, like, there's hardly any activity there because this is the people have all their gated communities, and like they don't have to do much because things are done in that place. But we were worried not 96, goodness, I was thinking 96, but in 2019,
it's very different.
2019, there was like worry of the Freedom Front Plus definitely making inroads into the ward and the area, but they got 5% of the ward.
Okay,
and that's nothing. So really, anything can happen, but
I think from what I read, they do push hard on getting rid of affirmative action and stuff like that.
Yeah, very much so. And land expropriation and all that. Which
I get, but also, I mean, that should already be an indication of, certain thoughts and beliefs.
I mean, ActionSA is also quite anti the affirmative action, but they're also for having social grants and all that kind of stuff if need be.
I mean, affirmative action is a very broad term,
very
and I think it's mostly...
It's very great. It's been implemented very poorly.
Yes, and I think, I agree with affirmative action, but it depends what you implement for that. I think in South Africa particularly, it's very much characterized by BE, and BB. I remember Mr. Feldman is saying it now. But it's very much characterized by that, and in my personal opinion, I think it should be done more with how much money you have. And in South Africa, the majority of people who are poor are 99.2% of those who live in absolute poverty are black. So in my opinion, if you go with if you're providing more sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of opportunities, sort of equality of opportunities for those who are struggling like that, you hit two birds with one stone. You hit the sort of the racial aspect and more importantly, the economic aspect. Because currently BE, it's made a sort of elite, sort of black upper middle class.
That's
the issue, and I think that's why so many people are
it's not actually doing anything.
It's not doing anything because, I mean, in real terms, sort of real income has worsened for black people, especially. So you've gotten poorer in real terms. So it's I agree with affirmative action, but there needs to be a major overhaul as to how our country sorts out the inequalities of the past. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think we have discussed everything that we've wanted to.
Yes.
Obviously, if you have any more questions, you're welcome to hit us up or check out Luke on Twitter.
I don't know what your Twitter
Follow me, please.
But yeah.
Catch him at Woolies.
Yeah.
So catch me at Woolies. Yeah. Catch me outside. How about
But thanks Luke for coming on to the podcast.
Yes.
It was very fun.
Thank you for inviting me. I really had fun, and I think this also to reiterate the point: do your own research.
Yes. Don't listen to us fools.
Yeah, us fools, but
we know nothing.
But I hope that our sort of session has helped people's understanding of a few things, even if it's just broad understanding. But I think going forward, especially with voting, do your own research. You're entitled to your own opinion. Don't be swayed by others. Yes. But make up your mind and be involved.
Yes.
Exactly.
Go vote and wear sunblock.
Please vote. Cool. Yeah. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.